before I even start, I just want to point something out that the only reason I am here is because I stupidly answered an email from Chuck without carefully reading it. As Champlain students, you all understand what that's like because none of you read emails very well. I think we all agree, right? And the problem is that I found out later that I was replacing Erik Shonstrom, who has helmed the Blue Stool, given the inaugural talk for years and years and years. So I just want to say, there is no way I can replace Erik Shonstrom. So we will miss you, Erik. We love you. I am a poor substitute. I will be doing the inaugural Blue Stool this year, and then the following years will be obviously, I think, Erik Eskilsson, Eric Friedman, and Eric Sample. I believe you have to be named. I think that's the rule. That's the plan? Okay. So Chuck asked me to do this talk, and I was, of course, very flattered, and he then immediately responded with a second email saying, "What's your topic?" And I wrote back ambiguity. And ambiguity is simply the state of not knowing, the state of wonder, the state of not knowing what you do. And the reason I chose that as a topic is because I did not have a topic. That was a joke just for my own self, and I enjoyed it for a couple weeks, thinking that I was actually going to talk about ambiguity. But here's the problem with a placeholder like that, is that because ambiguity is my placeholder topic, it actually started to kind of become my real topic because I never really, it was sort of like, you know when you like start dating someone your first year of college and they're like kind of cool, but you're really just with them because you don't want to be alone. Everybody's experienced that. But then like you share a Spotify account eventually and then maybe get a cat together and then you find that you married, like you may as well just be with that person, right? They were a placeholder, but at this point it's like sort of the ship has sailed. Just go with that person. So that's what happened with ambiguity. So I had ambiguity as my topic, but I didn't do anything with it. I waited until the last second. Again, that may be familiar to some of you. Some of my students are here. I know it's familiar to some of them to wait till the last second. So there's two things that we can do when confronted with ambiguity, not knowingness. One of those responses is to become curious about what could be out there. What are some solutions? What are some alternatives? What are some things I could do in this state of ambiguity? The other response is fear. I can become afraid. I can sort of shy away from that state of unknowingness. And that's what happened to me because I waited a very long time to think about what I was going to talk about. So in that state of fear, I began to kind of create a list of sort of surefire hits of things I could talk about. And then I put those ideas, those topics on a piece of paper, and I walked away for a couple days. When I came back to them, I was struck with a shocking conclusion, is that my list was very white. It was very white people-y stuff. And when I say white people-y stuff, you all know what I'm talking about, like golf shirts, country clubs, that sort of thing. It was very white people-y stuff. And I didn't want to do that. I didn't want to come out and talk about white people-y stuff, but I was in a state of fear. Now, here's where things get a little complicated, because if I don't respond with curiosity, if I respond in fear, there's a certain part of my brain that's kind of controlling my behavior, and it's called the amygdala. And the amygdala is the place where like fear and irritation and anger live. And so I was in my amygdala in that moment, right? So here's a second sort of scary part about the amygdala. If I show someone a face, and that face is a person of another race, the amygdala fires. Meaning our initial response, and they've repeated these studies again and again, to a face that is not white like me, is actually fear. That's our first response. And that's a release, and it happens within about milliseconds. And that's a scary realization to make. So there I was in that scary place, thinking about ambiguity, thinking about fear, and thinking about the fact that my amygdala was driving my behavior, sort of leading me away from topics that might be interesting, might be inclusive, might be great, and it's kind of sending me down this very, very white road. And the problem with that is that I see the world through my own subjective embodied reality, which is, as a white person, that's who I am. I'm a white guy. I'm a middle class, heterosexual, 6'3", American white male. So that's how I see the world and that's how I experience the world. And it's very hard to get out of our subjective embodied reality. Because I walk through the world in this body, and that's how I experience the days that I walk through. The other problem with that is as sort of an embodied experience, I have a tendency to associate myself with people who are like me. And we all do this on some level. Put some Yankees and Red Sox fans in a room and they'll go at it. Put some Real Madrid and Barcelona fans in a room and they'll go at it. I used to sit upstairs with a former colleague, Brian Murphy, and I would say, Brian, the best album of the 90s was Nirvana Nevermind. And he would say, no, it's not, it's Nas-Illmatic. And then someone else would say, no, it's not, it's PJ Harvey Dry. And we would all argue back and forth. And because we can never sort of come to a conclusion about that, because our own subjective reality drives the way that we move through the world. And mine happens to be white. But I didn't want to use anything from that list, right? I didn't want to go there. So the problem is that me arguing for Nirvana Nevermind, or me arguing that Real Madrid is better than Barcelona, or me arguing any of those things, that's really just sort of rationality, but I'm really doing a rationalization, right? And those are very differences. There's a key difference between those things. I'm rationalizing my worldview as a white guy, right? And I do this all the time. I should teach these things. I should offer these examples of intellectual excellence, because that's what I've rationalized as the examples of those things. That's not rationality. That's me creating a kind of construct around that. So the question becomes then, what do I do, right? What do I do when I'm sitting at my house and I have to do this talk, and I didn't read Chuck's email very carefully, and I realized I had to replace Eric Ronas, and I have no idea of what to talk about? What do I do? And I'm in a place of fear, and I want to go back to my old standbys. So really, there's only one thing we can do, is recognize that operating from a place of fear is never going to be helpful. Operating from that response in my amygdala, operating from that response of irritation or fear, is never going to get me where I want to go. So what you have to do is you have to sort of individuate yourself, right? I have to say, like, well, I may be part of this thing, but I'm also just me. And I can kind of take a step back, and I can understand the world as it is. I can understand other people as individuals, and I have to like readjust what I think. And here's the problem with that, is that it's really hard to do, right? Because we're moving through the world through our own subjective embodied experience, and that's just how we're incorporating everything. But there's actually some moments where you can do it. Because here's the other thing I want to tell you about the moment when we see a picture of someone that we don't recognize, someone that maybe isn't part of our us group, right? Someone that looks like a them, someone that looks like an other with a capital O. In that moment, we are not only often triggering the amygdala, but we also don't have something called frontal face recognition, which is a sort of part of our brain that recognizes it as a face. So basically, the brain becomes ambiguous about what's actually happening. And as we learned from the beginning, when we come across things that are unfamiliar, when we come across things that we don't understand, yes, the amygdala fires. Yes, we can respond with fear, but we can also embrace that not knowing, because that's a form of ambiguity. We can embrace that ambiguity and choose one of two paths. We can either choose to be fearful, or we can choose the path of curiosity and choose to be curious about that individual and move through that. And look, that's easier said than done. We walk around through the day trying to rationalize everything that we're doing, but oftentimes we need to just stop in that moment, take note of how we're feeling, and realize that we need to follow the path of curiosity and not the path of fear in the amygdala. Hey, guess what? This is the 11th year, Chuck, the 11th year of the Blue Stool. Please come back for all the Blue Stool talks this year. There'll be a whole great roster of people. Thank you for coming, and you guys have like 30 seconds to get to class. So have a great day. Bye, everyone.